Hello everyone, Inquisitor Vaughn here, and in today's video we are going to talk about a character from the older Warhammer 40k lore called the Angel. This is a topic that one of my subscribers asked me to look into a while ago, like during the time that I was solely focused on my Primarch videos, and I said I'd do it, but it totally escaped my mind until I looked at my list of topics. So if that subscriber is still here, this video was made with your inquiry in mind. So before we delve into this, I want to say that a lot of the older lore for Warhammer 40k has been retconned and can no longer be compatible with the current lore, and usually things like this are stated directly and openly. But some of the old lore has not been retconned. It's simply been untouched and regulated to the depth of the Imperial archives. Much of it doesn't contradict the existing lore, but it also doesn't keep up with the current lore in regards to language or continuity. I enjoy delving into the old lore and seeing if it could make sense with the new lore, primarily because I like to talk about Warhammer 40k lore as if all available lore is true or can be true if given enough research. One such example of this is the lore about the Angel. According to the ancient lore of Warhammer 40k, and more specifically, the resources of the Inquisition, the Angel, that was also called the Sleeper and the Angel of Destruction, was a powerful living weapon that the Emperor created on Terra and used during the Unification Wars at the end of the Age of Strife. What's clear from available information is that the Angel's use predated the Astartes legions significantly, and it was initially intended to fight the demonic presence on Terra at the time. In description, the Angel was twice as tall as a man, it had large wings on its back, and had a halo of energy around its head. For a weapon, it carried a large sword that trailed blue flame, which it used to annihilate cities and populations in mere moments. It was nearly invulnerable physically, and was completely resistant to psychic attack. Any psychic attacks that were thrown at it, it was able to reflect back at its caster. The purpose of the Angel was to defeat the enemies of the Emperor, and during this time, one of his biggest enemies was a demon prince called Ferraguatla. Ferraguatla was one of the primal demon princes that existed far before humanity, kind of like Be'lakor, who had settled onto Terra when he saw that humanity was evolving into a species that he could manipulate and play with. According to available information, Ferraguatla was a demon prince of Tzeentch and was responsible for the Age of Strife, inciting the conflicts between the Terran nations by manipulating humanity and gathering cult followers. His manipulations would lead to the mass destruction and the use of devastating weapons between the nations on Earth. These weapons would obliterate the surface and environment of Terra, bringing forth the Age of Strife. During the Age of Strife, the Emperor used the Thunder Warriors to not only fight the Demon Prince but also its followers on Terra, and using the Angel, Ferraguatla was actually driven from Terra, fleeing across the galaxy. The lore says that the Emperor pursued the Demon Prince and cornered it on a world called Caris Cephalon, where the Angel and the Emperor imprisoned the demon in the very crust of the planet. Of course, this is where the lore deviates from what we understand it to be now, because according to the current lore and understanding of the Great Crusade, the Emperor's expansion from Terra was a slow one and mentions nothing about his pursuit of the Demon Prince. There is also no records of the Astartes or Primarchs ever seeing the being that is called the Angel. However, there is a way that this lore could fit into the current setting, but I'll get back to that. After the imprisonment of Ferraguatla, the Angel began to reveal its flaws in design. Though it was one of the Emperor's greatest weapons in the fight against chaos, its understanding was warped, especially toward humanity. Because it had been deployed during the Age of Strife, where most humans were corrupted by chaos, it did not trust humans and would believe that all humans would eventually fall to chaos. It would act on this belief by annihilating populations of humanity that it encountered, and seeing this, the Emperor had to put a stop to it. Using a piece of corrupted flesh from Ferraguatla's body, the Emperor baited the Angel back into its stasis coffin in which it usually was kept. Overwhelmed with the impulse to destroy the corrupted flesh, The angel fell for the trap, rushing into his coffin before the emperor sealed and locked the coffin. Following this, the emperor had the angel sent back to Terra in order for it to be destroyed. Unfortunately, the angel's coffin was somehow smuggled out of the Sol system before its destruction could happen. So for us to somehow make sense of the lore and try to fit it into the current understanding of the lore, the history of the angel is spread throughout the lore. During the Age of Strife, the angel was used to pacify early Terra before the creation of the Astartes and the Primarchs. Using the angel's help, the emperor would force Ferragoatla to flee Terra. Sometime during the Great Crusade, Ferragoatla would be found and imprisoned by both the emperor and the angel, with the angel being a hidden weapon. During the Great Crusade, the angel would annihilate human populations and had to be restrained and sent back to Terra for its destruction, but somehow it was smuggled out of the Sol system before that could happen. From here, the timeline progresses how we understand it to have progressed. The Horus Heresy happens, the Emperor is entombed on the Golden Throne, and we reach the current timeline. Before the Emperor was ever mortally wounded, though, he and Malcador the Sigillite created the foundations for an imperial organization that would be known as the Inquisition, which would seek out treachery and betrayal within the Imperium, given his authority to use any means necessary to do so. This organization thrived in the 40th millennium and is responsible for the return of the angel. A misguided inquisitor by the name of Liechtenstein knew about Ferragoatla and thought that by freeing the demon prince from its imprisonment, it would help him to locate a library of heretical knowledge. This inquisitor Liechtenstein would locate the world of Caris Cephalon, which had been settled on by the Imperium, and he journeyed there in order to fulfill his goals. When other, more Puritan inquisitors found out about Liechtenstein's plans, they rushed to Cephalon to try to stop him. But they were 2 steps behind. Liechtenstein had already located Ferragoatla's prison and was nearly tricked into opening a warp gate that would have completely freed the demon prince, but he was stopped by another inquisitor. Freed from his prison, but not free from the world, Ferragoatla would need to find a host to possess and would eventually gather followers on Cephalon. While this was happening, the Puritan inquisitors had made it to Cephalon, discovering that the demon prince had already been released from its imprisonment, and decided that the only way to defeat it was to use the angel, but no one knew where it was. The Puritan inquisitors pored over information available in the Cephalon Institute of Ecclesiastical Antiquities and discovered not only where the angel was, but how to both release it and imprison it again. The angel was also on Cephalon, underground in its stasis coffin. The Puritans rushed to the location. Meanwhile, Ferragoatla had influenced his followers to perform a ritual that would enable him to possess the cardinal of the world. The possession was successful, and with a body to use, Ferragoatla began to destroy Cephalon and its peoples. The Puritan inquisitors raced to the location of the angel, but were attacked by the radical inquisitors. Despite of this, the Puritans were able to release the angel, and Ferragoatla ironically arrived. So basically everybody was fighting. In this mass conflict, Ferragoatla was actually killed by the angel before the angel turned on the inquisitors present. Following the emperor's actions, the Puritan inquisitors took a piece of the corrupted flesh of the demon prince and threw it into the angel's coffin. Just as before, the angel rushed into the coffin to destroy what it thought was the demon prince, and once again, the angel was trapped in its stasis coffin. According to the lore, the angel is still in the possession of the Inquisition, trapped in its stasis coffin. Now, this is a fascinating story because even though it doesn't align with the current knowledge of what we have on the Great Crusade, it does provide some lore about the Age of Strife. We know the Age of Strife was a result of the end of the Dark Age of technology, but according to this lore, there was some demonic influence involved. It's interesting to know that, at the same time that the Emperor was leading the Thunder Warriors, he also used the angel to fight against demonic influence on Terra. So, what exactly was the angel? There are a few theories. One is that the angel was a man of iron. This theory raises from the fact that besides a few vague details, there is very little actual information on the angel that will suggest that it was a human being or human-like at all. There's no description of its voice or its face. This theory is also based on the fact that the angel's reaction to humanity and it deciding that all of humanity would eventually fall to chaos and therefore need to be destroyed is similar to the reaction that the men of iron had toward humanity in a general sense. However, this theory is kind of dismissed by the fact that the angel was described as a living weapon that was created by the emperor himself. Another theory is that the angel was a Primarch, not just a Primarch, but the first Primarch that the emperor ever created, made before he created the others later on. This is a convincing theory because of the description of the angel being twice the height of a man, being nearly invulnerable to attack, and repelling psychic attack. But to me, I don't think that the angel was a Primarch necessarily. It's mostly due to context. During the Age of Strife, the Thunder Warriors were led by figures that were called Primarchs, and though they were just leaders of the Thunder Warrior legions and not really the Primarchs that we would know about later in the lore, the name Primarch as a rank already existed. Whatever the angel was, it couldn't just be called a Primarch. Perhaps it was a proto-Primarch, the Emperor's first attempt at creating a Primarch from which he would learn and tweak his design later on. Perhaps he was something more or less than a Primarch, but we do know that the Emperor referred to the angel as his favorite son in the following incantation attributed to the Emperor himself.
Into the darkness of time I send you. Against the splendor of your being I bind you. The blood cools, the fire goes out, the light arises. Angel's time is up. Sleep, my favorite son, and dream of purity.
As far as I could find, there is no actual artwork or official artwork of the angel. However, we do have an image of his stasis coffin, and here it is. Now, if you are a fan of Warhammer 40k and a fan of the Space Marines, the symbol on the stasis coffin of the angel looks very familiar. In fact, it almost looks exactly like the Legion symbol for the First Legion, the Angels of Death, also known as the Dark Angels. This is an interesting correspondence because the Dark Angels were the first Legion of Astartes to be created, and their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, was considered the first Primarch. Ironic that the First Legion would eventually call themselves the Angels of Death and the Dark Angels. But the symbol on the stasis tomb is not just a sword. Wrapped around the blade of the sword is another symbol, one that most of us know and have seen before but kind of look over. This symbol is the symbol of the Prime Helix. It is commonly known as the symbol of the Apothecary Space Marine, as we often see it on apothecaries. As a symbol, the Prime Helix symbolizes the Space Marine's altered DNA, which ultimately derives from the Emperor himself through the Primarchs that he created using his own genetic information. It is a powerful symbol, and the fact that it's featured on the angel's coffin could further support the idea that the angel was possibly the Emperor's first attempt at creating a Primarch. The angel was a living weapon created by the Emperor, made to fight chaos. It was a proto-Primarch and can be said to be the first superhuman Primarch greater than the Thunder Warrior Primarchs that existed at the time, and a prototype of those that would later exist. And as the story goes, it was entombed in a stasis coffin in the possession of the Inquisition. As far as we know, the angel itself is still in the possession of the Inquisition and is something that is not mentioned in the current lore. Being that its coffin has a stasis field within it, the angel is still alive, just sleeping, waiting to be awakened once more to fight chaos. It's interesting that the angel sounds a lot like Sanguinius in regards to having wings and a halo of light, and him being one of the Primarchs that had early encounters with the forces of chaos. Though Sanguinius wasn't the Emperor's favorite son out of all of the Primarchs, that would be Horus. Something else I thought about was the angel's sword. It said that the angel's sword was a flaming sword, and ironically, the sword that the Emperor carried during the Great Crusade was a flaming sword. The Emperor's armor, called the One True Armor, was broken into many pieces and formed into Crux Terminatus, placed on some of the Terminator warplate that was distributed throughout the chapters. The Emperor's tilting shield became the shield of Lionel Johnson, and the Emperor's power fist was taken by the Dark Angel specifically and made into thousands of cruxes. But the Emperor's sword was never taken after the heresy. Instead, it was laid out across his lap while he sat on the golden throne. Now, this is according to currently retconned lore. The Emperor's sword was not only a practical weapon of war, but it was also a tool against chaos, because when the Emperor struck a demon with it, it could give them a true death, meaning that they couldn't respawn in the warp. They were legitimately destroyed. And this makes me wonder, with it being a tool against chaos, was the Emperor's sword actually the angel's sword? In the current lore, Roboute Guilliman carries what is believed to be the Emperor's flaming sword. I am skeptical about this for a few reasons. The old lore said that the Emperor's sword was laid before him on the Golden Throne for 10,000 years until the 13th Black Crusade that happened in the 41st millennium, and we do have artwork of this. The new lore says that the sword was given to Guilliman at his return from stasis by Belisarius Cawl, who kept it safe on Mars for thousands of years. If I were to think that both of these pieces of lore are true, which I am inclined to do, then I would conclude that the sword Guilliman carries is not really the Emperor's sword. It might be a powerful sword that has the same ability to slay demons, but I'm not sure that it's actually the Emperor's sword. To double down on this, the design of the handle of the sword that Guilliman has is different than what is shown to be the Emperor's sword. Perhaps the Emperor had multiple swords and Guilliman has one of them, but regardless, the actual Emperor's sword might be the sword that the angel carried. Now, as I said before, there is no official artwork of the angel, but there is this art piece by the artist Acolyte Narina. Allow me to explain why I think this is a great portrayal of the angel. First, with the long hair and glowing eyes, this portrayal of the angel looks like the Emperor himself. Second, he is wearing white and gold armor. The angel was the Emperor's favorite son, and later on, another one of the Emperor's favorite sons would also wear white and gold armor, Horus Lupercal. Also, the color scheme reminds me of the original Emperor versus Horus diorama, in which the Emperor himself is wearing white and gold armor. So there's a bit of correspondence there that I think is really, flavorful, really cool. Third, the wings look glorious. Fourth, we see the coffin-like shape that the angel emerged from in the background. And fifth, the sword that the angel carries, its rest in blue flames and its hilt has the sign of the double-headed Aquila, which would make it the same sword that the Emperor carried during the Great Crusade, which equals like really clever correspondence. Acolyte Narina did a great job with this, and I think we should just all accept that this is the angel and this is like official art of the angel. But that was my video about the angel. What do you think about this character? Do you think it might be something that comes back in the lore in the future? Do you think that the sword that Guilliman carries is actually the Emperor's sword? And do you think it's possible that the Emperor's sword is actually the angel's sword? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please share the video with anyone who you think might enjoy watching it, as it supports the channel and helps it grow. And that's pretty much it. Without anything else to say, Inquisitor Vaughn out. Remember, the Emperor protects and the future is successor.